Promising to stand together, Arab leaders pledged to help restore peace and security in Yemen. But with instability spreading through the Middle East, can the region really solve its own problems? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Hazem Seeker. Welcome to another edition of Inside Story. The UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon has said negotiations are the only way to prevent a long-term conflict in Yemen. The Saudi-led airstrikes there have taken center stage at the Arab League summit in Egypt. Saudi Arabia's King Salman promised to continue the strikes against Houthi rebels until peace and stability are restored. It could prove to be a test case for how Arab leaders deal with regional conflicts on their own, with only limited help from global powers like the US. The Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi has called for a united Arab military force to tackle regional threats.
It is necessary to find tools for the joint Arab action in order to put this approach into action. However, the challenges are exacerbated by terrorism as well as ferocious foreign intervention. We need to deeply and confidently think about how to deal with new developments by forming and establishing a joint defense force without undermining any of the sovereignty, stability or national security of any Arab states.
Well, the Arab League was established in 1945 as a way of increasing cooperation across the Arab world. It began with 6 members: Egypt, Lebanon, Iraq, Jordan, Yemen and Saudi Arabia. It's since expanded to include more African and Gulf states and now has 21 members. Syria was a member, but it's been suspended since the uprising there descended into war. The Council meets at least twice a year. Each member holds 1 vote regardless of the size of the country. But the organisation has a history of ineffectiveness and doubts remain about whether its members can resolve the region's problems alone. Well, let's bring in our guests now to talk more about this. From Beirut, we have Rami Khouri, a senior fellow at the Issam Faris Institute for Public Policy and International Affairs at the American University in Beirut. In London, we have Firas Abi Ali, senior manager of Middle East and North Africa analysis at IHS Country Risk. And also in Beirut, Joseph Keshishian, a columnist for Gulf News. Good to have you all with us, gentlemen. Joseph Keshishian, let me start with you. What do you make then of how the Arab nations have responded to events in Yemen over the last few days and what's been discussed at this summit? Is it the right response?
Remarkably, the Arab world has been mired for the past 50 years in its inability to take any kind of action. And all of a sudden, for the first time in memory, one hears serious concessions being made, political concessions, at an Arab League summit, whereby the petty differences that existed among different states are being put aside in order to have a joint decision to actually deal with an imminent crisis on the Arabian Peninsula. This is new, this is fresh. Very few people know how to handle this, and it's remarkable that it happened in the venue that it has happened, the Arab League. Hopefully this will be a sign of the kind of action that the Arab populations expect from their leaders.
Firas Abi Ali, just from a military standpoint, it is going to take more than airstrikes to get this done, isn't it? And I suppose we saw a recognition of that in the discussions on Saturday with this talk of an Arab military force.
Yeah, I think that airstrikes are going to be quite limited in their effectiveness given how fighting is conducted in Yemen in a rather dispersed manner and small numbers, which makes airstrikes considerably less effective. In addition, the longer that airstrikes are conducted against civilian assets or causing civilian damage, the more likely it is that a significant portion of the public will turn against the Arab intervention. Already on some social media, we see resentment among the Yemenis. Last, a ground operation in Yemen is likely to be a logistical nightmare, and trying to fight up the Yemeni mountains will very much favor the defender, in this case, the Houthi and a significant portion of the Yemeni army.
Rami Khouri, what role should the Arab League be playing here, do you think? Is it responding in the right way? Do they risk making things worse by responding the way they have?
Well, things have already been made worse by the Saudi-led coalition attack on Yemen, and this is going to unleash all kinds of negative forces, militarism, refugees, destruction, radicalism, and which we've seen over and over in many Arab countries. Every time a major military attempt has been made to solve a political problem in Syria, in Libya, in Iraq, in Palestine, anywhere, it ends up making the situation much worse and opening the space for people like ISIS and al-Qaeda and Jabhat al-Nusra and all of these, Jund al-Sham, and all of these tiny little groups that are Islamist, Takfiri, extremist militants, terrorists in most cases, to take root and to work. So we have a really, really dangerous situation. It is appropriate, as Joseph said, for the Arab League to try to find a way to do collective action in the service of the well-being of the Arab people. My question is, why wasn't this done in Palestine, in Libya, in Syria, Iraq, in Lebanon, and other places? Why is it suddenly now happening, and why is everybody rushing in to join? It's very obvious, because the Saudis have a major new challenge in their leadership to figure out what do they do. They're terrified of the Americans gradually pulling out of the region. They're terrified of Iran building strategic relations with all kinds of people in Syria and Iraq and Lebanon, and they're trying to figure out a way to respond. And when the Saudis respond, there's money, and when there's money, many Arab countries and others flock to take their share.
Yeah, let me put that question then to Joseph Kashishian. There are plenty of other conflicts in the region right now. Why Yemen, and why now?
This is the $22,000 question. If the Arab leaders did something, then they're accused of taking action. If they do nothing, they're accused of doing nothing. Obviously, every country in the world is going to protect its interests. And I think that it is really unbecoming to blame the Saudis for looking after their national security interests. It is, for that matter, a similar objective that the Egyptians have now set for themselves with the proposal of President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to create this Arab joint force. It might be a nightmare, of course, and the Egyptian history in Yemen is nothing to brag about, but nevertheless, I think that the reason why there is this involvement in Yemen is not only because the Saudis are afraid that the Americans are leaving the region, but because there is something very new on the map, on the regional map. You have the interference of Iran, a non-Arab country, interfering in internal Arab affairs. And this is something that no Arab country can really tolerate. And this is the primary reason why you see this coalition of forces that have come together in order to meet this tremendous challenge from Iran. Those who say that Iran is not a hegemonic power, that it does not threaten the Arab world, must really answer fundamental questions about why it is that Iran feels comfortable, at ease, and willing to commit both financial resources, technical resources, even advisors in places like Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, and now in Yemen. As I say, 4 Arab countries in which Iran has no business getting involved. That's the reason why you see the coalition mobilizing the way it has mobilized against the Houthis in Yemen.
Faraz Abi Ali, if we talk then about the possibility of a ground assault, I know you want to respond to what some of Joseph Kashishian has said as well, but a ground assault has its own risks as well, and this was touched on earlier about the fact that the Houthis, they know this terrain better than anyone else, and there is this profound risk of this turning into a long, drawn-out conflict, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you remember in 2009 when Saudi Arabia first attempted an intervention in Yemen, what ended up happening was that the Houthi captured Saudi territory rather than the Saudis capturing Houthi territory. So this goes to show you exactly how challenging it is. I definitely agree that Saudi Arabia is facing a major challenge. In fact, Saudi Arabia is gradually losing the proxy war that it has engaged in against Iran for the last several years. As you know, the Iranians are doing all right in Iraq. In Syria, they've managed to hold on to their core strategic interests, even though they're not doing that well. In Lebanon, they've completely won. For the Saudis, they've got a big Shia problem in Bahrain, where the Iranians, there's no evidence that the Iranians are actually involved in Bahrain. And now we're seeing engagement in Yemen. If Yemen goes to the Iranians, this really fundamentally threatens the stability of Saudi Arabia and the ability of Saudi Arabia to retain its territory and its sovereignty. And that really becomes the problem. And this is why we're seeing this reaction from the Saudis, given the unexpected gains that the Houthis have made. But it's worth remembering that the reason we're seeing vigorous action is because the situation has become so desperate for the Saudis. It's not a reflection of Arab unity or Arab national pride or anything of that sort. It's that the proxy war has gotten so out of hand that the interests of the principals that have been financing and backing this proxy war have become sufficiently threatened for the principals to get involved directly. And this is why the Saudis are interfering directly in Yemen. Conversely, this is why the Iranians are intervening so overtly in Iraq, following the significant territorial gains that the Islamic State made.
Yeah, Rami Khouri, when you look at this from the Saudi point of view, they have an Iranian-backed government in Iraq to their east. They have Iranian influence in Syria to the north. And then we have the Houthis taking power in the Yemeni capital right on their doorstep. It's not surprising that the Saudis reacted this way, is it?
No, it's not surprising at all. It's actually very natural. But I have a fundamental disagreement with the analysis that says that Iran is a hegemonic strategic threat to Saudi Arabia or to others in the Arabian Peninsula or other places in the Arab world. I just don't see that evidence.
The point was just made there of Iranian influence in all of these other countries. Doesn't that point to hegemonic power?
Sure, influence. Well, I don't see the evidence for hegemonic power. I see influence, I see strategic interests, I see mutually beneficial relationships. What are the Iranians going to do? Are they going to invade Saudi Arabia and take over the oil wells? I mean, I don't see that last hegemonic predatory threat. That's what I don't see. I don't see a lot of evidence for Iranian support for the Houthis. People talk about it, but I haven't seen much on the table. I'm not defending Iran. Iran has a lot of things that we can criticize for, and I'm certainly the last person who would want to live under an Iranian regime, and I don't see many Arabs going to want to live in Iran. They want to go live in Dubai, and they want to go live in California. But Iran is a power that's been there for about 5,000 years in the region and wants to be treated as a power that has its interest and not threatened and subjected to double standards. Saudi Arabia has been a power in the region for about 100 years and is just learning now to act like a power and sending its army around. The real drive that pushed the Saudis to move, and the reason you have Saudi Arabia and Egypt and people like this now working together to create this force, is they're terrified by what started 4 years ago, which is a populist, revolutionary, insurrectionary kind of movement across many Arab countries, people trying to overturn the old conservative autocratic regimes and have something more participatory, more accountable, maybe more democratic, more humane, more equitable. And this is something that the Saudis and the Egyptians, certainly with the field marshal turned President Sisi, they want to stop this at all costs. And this is the latest attempt to do this. I don't see Houthi control of Yemen as a real direct threat. What the Saudis should do is engage with these countries and have a regional understanding with all of these countries that are different from them, whether it's Houthi run Iran or Houthi run Yemen or Iran.
Joseph Kishishin, I want to get your response to that, and I also want to ask you about when we look at this from an Arab League perspective as well, because there has been this criticism, and we made the point at the top there, that the Arab League is basically just a big talking shop where nothing substantial really gets done. Is that criticism justified, do you think?
The Arab League used to be nothing more than a talking shop. But I think, before I come back to this point, I think that Mr. Khoury is really making a very facile comparison when he says that Iran is 5,000 years old and Saudi Arabia is 100. Sure, Bahrain and the Emirates are only 30, 40 years old, and you cannot make those kinds of comparisons, but the Arabs have been around for longer than 5,000 years. This is facile. It does not really, it's unbecoming, really. However, Iran is a real power. There is no doubt about that. Iran plays an important role in the future of the region, but Iran is not an Arab country. Why is it so difficult for people to understand that Iran, a non-Arab country, is interfering in the affairs of the Arab world? We can make the same criticism towards Israel. Israel is not an Arab country. It is interfering and stealing land and obfuscating all kinds of peace processes because it is a foreign entity in the region. Iran is an important country. It has an important role and it has strategic role to play in the region, but it does not have any rights to interfere in Arab affairs. Secondly, and equally important, I think that Iran's potential hegemonic influence is to kindle the sectarian divisions that exist between Sunnis and Shias in the Arab world. Arab leaders do not wish that. They don't want to have a war based on Sunni-Shia rivalries. Saudi Arabia does not want to go to war with Iran. Saudi Arabia does not want to destroy Yemen. It wants to keep the unity of Yemen together. But what it does not want, on the other hand, is to have the Houthis threaten the legitimate government of President Hadi and the process that has been laid in front of them to find some kind of a solution. Ideally, the best solution, whether it is to the League of Arab States or the GCC or another organization, a UN-sponsored organization, is to find some kind of a political settlement. But every initiative that the Yemeni dialogue has produced so far has been turned down by the Houthis. At the end of the day, the onus really is on them to come to the table and negotiate in good faith, not to have a coup d'etat, to overthrow Hadi, or equally important, not to threaten to spill over into Saudi Arabia and the other countries of the Arabian Peninsula.
Firas Abi Ali, how effective can the Arab League be as an organization in resolving some of these other conflicts in the region, not just Yemen, but Iraq, Syria, and to some extent Libya as well?
I don't think that there is a particular precedent for them being effective. I think that there's a significant amount of there's a significant amount of mistrust between Arab countries that, for example, prevents a country like Jordan from accepting the deployment of Arab troops on its territory for fear that said Arab troops would end up residing in Jordan and trying to control the country. And I think that this shows the hollowness of various slogans around Arab nationalism and around that kind of rather outdated thinking, I would say. More to the point, I do agree that Iran is a hegemonic power. It is engaged in an empire-building project, not through invasions, nothing as crude as that, but in a much more sophisticated way through alliances, through interests, through sharing expertise, which makes you wonder, is this really so much, is this really so bad?
Rami Khoury, do you think a lot of what we've seen now with the response to Yemen and this talk of a joint Arab force is a recognition of where the US sits in all of this, that they have taken more of a hands-off approach, and that there is a need on the part of Arab leaders to sort out their own problems?
Oh, I think certainly that's going on, and this has been going on for a couple of years now in the region. Two things. One, people are kind of fed up with having to rely on foreign powers to solve their problems and bring stability to their countries. And people have also realized that foreign intervention, especially military intervention, certainly the last 25 years of American military action in the Middle East and South Asia has brought only catastrophes and created zones of fertile growth for al-Qaeda and ISIS and others. So that is certainly an issue, but it's more than just the U.S. getting tired of the Middle East. It's the realignment of power relationships among regional powers. You have Turkey, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, really, for the four major ones. Israel's out of this equation for now, but the Turks, Iranians, Saudis have to figure out how to get along, and the Egyptians want to make a comeback and come on the scene. But it's hard to see Egypt talking seriously about regional security issues and joint forces when it can't even bring security to its own capital city and northern Sinai, where there's a real serious Takfiri threat coming out of there of violence and terrorism. So there are real reasons why the Saudis and Egyptians and others are doing what they're doing. It's perfectly rational, it's perfectly normal. I just don't think it's going to succeed. Militarism, whether by Arabs or by Westerners, only brings catastrophe. You need a political resolution, you need a real national dialogue in Yemen, not one that was engineered by the GCC mainly. You need to have genuine governance reconfiguration in all of the Arab countries. You know, there isn't a single leader at this Arab summit who has actually been validated in a credible process by their own people in terms of elections or voting or anything like that. So we're dealing with leaders who don't really have deep links to their own citizenries through formal processes of accountability or participation. So the problems are much deeper.
So when we talk about a political solution to this, and I want to put this then to Firas Abi Ali, is it possible that the Saudis then could be using this air operation to get greater leverage in negotiations for some sort of a power-sharing agreement in Yemen, and that'll be as far as things go on the military side?
Well, they might be forced to do that if we see a repeat of the 2009 scenario in which the Houthi ended up capturing some territory in Saudi Arabia and in which the Saudi military did rather poorly. We might end up seeing that kind of thing. But from the speech of King Salman, he seems to be saying that he wants to restore security and stability to Yemen. Now, Yemen hasn't had security or stability since 1994, as far as I can remember. Getting that is a very tall order. It seems to me that the Saudis have gotten involved in this primarily in a reactive manner without having a clearly defined political objective in mind. If they think that they can engineer militarily a return of Hadi to Sana'a, this is going to be extremely difficult, and even then they would end up having to maintain a force there indefinitely fighting against the Houthi insurgency. So the Saudis haven't defined their own political objectives clearly, and this is the first limitation when it comes to military power. You've got to explain to people why you're using military power and to what end, and that is completely vague.
Joseph Kashishian, I want to put this point to you that was made earlier about the U.S. taking this hands-off approach. Do you think that is in the best interests of the region for outside powers like the United States and other Western countries to let the Arab countries sort this out on their own?
Certainly, I think that foreign interferences are all across the board must be stopped at all levels, whether it is the United States, Britain, Iran, Israel, all of them without any exceptions. I think that the outside powers, however, are not going to essentially give up and move from the region because they have interests in the area. And it is true that countries like Saudi Arabia have a great deal at stake, and time will tell whether or not the war that they've started now against the Houthis will be successful or not.
And on that note, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you to all three of our guests, Rami Khouri in Beirut, Firas Abi Ali in London, and Joseph Kashishian in Beirut. Thanks very much for your time. And thank you for joining us for another edition of Inside Story. Remember, if you have anything you'd like to add, just go to our program page online at aljazeera.com. You can post your comments on facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or why not send us your tweets to @AJ Inside Story. I'm Hazem Sika from all of the team here. Bye for now.